Okay, thank you for joining us. I am very excited today to have someone on the podcast who I've been looking forward to talking to for some time now. I've got Dr. Geoff Smart, who is the founder and chairman of ghSMART, which is a leadership development company and has been highly successful, has been going for some time now. Geoff, welcome to the podcast.
It's a great pleasure to be here, Professor.
I tell you what, I won't call you doctor and you don't call me professor, and we'll call it quits.
Sounds good. It's a deal.
Could you please give us a brief history of how you got to where you are today?
Sure. Let's see here. So, how I got to where we are today. So, in the beginning, I was a grunt working in a private equity firm in Chicago, Illinois, in the USA, crunching numbers and evaluating potential investments for my bosses. But what struck me was, and I was an undergraduate at the time at Northwestern University studying economics. And what struck me was they said, you know what? It's not just what we invest in that matters most, it's who we invest in. And I thought, well, that's interesting. So why are we spending all of our time focusing on the products and the financials and the markets, right? So this need for high-end leadership advisory and analytics, specifically in the venture capital space, was kind of the early genesis of the idea for ghSMART. My father had a PhD in industrial and organizational psychology. He had a one-person consulting show, him and an assistant. That's my growing up years. I'd listen to him counseling executives on hiring and developing their talent. So I was very aware of that little sub-niche field. But to my knowledge, it had never been really applied into this big world of finance to put basically like the money and the people parts of deals together with a bit more surgical precision. So that the genesis of ghSMART was, age 17, did this internship, saw a need in the market. Age 21, went off to graduate school, studied with Peter Drucker, the great,
Wow.
Peter Drucker. He was at Claremont out in Los Angeles. And so I just got a straight up psychology master's and PhD, but all my classwork and my dissertation were around business psychology questions. And specifically my dissertation, which then turned into our firm, was looking at how venture capitalists evaluate the people part of an investment that they're planning to make. And I correlated it with the returns that they made on their deals and found a giant finding. So as you know, being in academia and research, like a high quantity of subjects, small effect still gets published in the academic journals, right?
Yep.
Well, this is a kind of medium-sized sample of 76 different venture capital firms and a whole bunch of their deals. But the effect that I discovered was huge. Venture capitalists who spent the most time and sort of following a disciplined process for evaluating the people part of a deal achieved 4 times the returns of those who didn't. So it's a huge finding. And so I just basically, decided to start consulting on it. So I went from student to consultant in the flash of an eye, and actually started ghSMART 2 years before I finished my doctoral program.
Wow. Gosh, that's impressive. And well, it's impressive on many counts. The first is having a useful PhD, which,
right?
Even in a business school, it's,
Yeah.
I'd say that, probably in 5% of cases is a PhD actually acted upon post-PhD rather than just simply turned into academic papers.
Sure. And it's good advice I give PhD students all the time. You might as well, which is go find a really great data set, find an interesting unasked question, and for gosh sake, don't reinvent the wheel and have to worry about necessarily collecting a full fresh new data set. I did not follow that advice. I used the 2 or 3 years that I did to do the study to meet my prospective market, to have conversations intimately about how they evaluated the people part of the deal and what their biggest fears were and concerns and problems around making bets on people, and then helping those leaders put together talented teams and grow valuable businesses.
Okay, this is so pertinent to so many of my own clients, but also listeners of this podcast who, they might have a consulting firm where they've started off with a couple of founders, perhaps brought in a couple of partners. They've got to 50 people, they're looking to exit. And sometimes their leadership teams are wanting a little bit, and they're the only people they could have got perhaps at the time. And I'm not disparaging any of them, because there's some very able leaders there, but you look at some individuals and you think, if we started where we are now, you probably wouldn't have got recruited.
Right.
Now
yes, well, so founding team to professional management and the transitions throughout the different stages of growth, I think are difficult, but not that difficult if you just expect that the people that you have at the very beginning, some of them will scale, some of them will find very specific I'm making a gesture of narrowness here as
Sure.
Joe and I are talking and facing each other, but as you grow the firm, someone who was rainmaking, and leading operations and helping advise on some part of the back office and finance and administration, and maybe doing a little HR in their free time. Over time, some folks will then say, oh, I'm really good at the rainmaking part. I think I'll spend more time on that, and they can scale with the business. Or some folks don't scale with the business, and that's fine too. I think it's a weird thing in global entrepreneurship, the thought that it's bad or shameful that people are good fits for different stages of growth of any business. So, and the founders who recognize that are the ones who can go the distance and who can stick around longer, and the ones who just kind of cling to an initial team or initial concept and are unwilling to adapt and grow and bring in the fresh new talent to fulfill new strategic needs as the business grows. They sort of flatten out and or don't have as much upside potential. But we've done 2 entire senior team successions, full 100%. Everybody's new.
Wow.
From 1995 I founded the business in 95. Today in 2023, we have 180 full-time ghSMART folks in 5 countries around the U.S. And we're growing about 20% a year. And we've had 2 managing partners after me. Randy Street in 2009 10x'd the business until 2021. So he did a great job as managing partner. He's now our vice chairman. He's still with us. I'm still with us. I'm the chairman and founder. And then Jeff McLean now is the second president to run the business. And both Randy changed out my operating team, and Jeff changed out Randy's operating team. So the senior leadership team of folks who have full day jobs of management are totally new at each one of these different stages. The partners haven't been around a long time. Lots of them have been here 10 or 20 years even. But the operating leadership has to change at different stages of growth of the business.
Sure. Okay. So you practice what you preach, obviously.
Yes.
It's not just all talk, is it?
No, that's right. We don't do everything perfectly, but around hiring, I'd say we're especially good, and around succession and being just humble and honest about what our strengths and weaknesses are, and therefore who are the key hires we need for this next stage of growth. I think we've navigated those waters fairly well.
Okay, I'd like to ask, in this case, I'd like to ask you 2 chunks of questions. One is about the growth of your own firm, which is obviously a great success story and very interesting. But before we get into that, I just wanted to ask your opinion on some leadership challenges I see with, especially in professional services. And the first one we've kind of talked around already, which is that you need different leadership teams and perhaps even different leadership styles for different strategic challenges that come with growth. And what I see with some of my clients is that you've kind of got this group of founders or senior people, and they're looking for jobs to do. So one will kind of take on HR stuff because he likes people, and another one will take on finance because they're good with numbers. And then they typically get to a size where they where you need the professionals to come in. You need someone who
Yes.
actually has CIPD accreditation or has been there and done that. But then equity becomes an issue. Two things become an issue actually, and one is equity, but the other is psychology. And in some ways, some founders, some partners, because they've got their position because they were in there so early, they feel like they should be doing something important when actually perhaps they're just good at delivery.
Yes.
Is that something you've come across? And in which case, how do you manage the psychology of some of these transitions?
Yeah, I really appreciate that, because you're working with people's own psychology about what success means and what they expected to be doing in their careers and what they want to do. And then also just kind of convention, which is like bigger titles are better and smaller titles are worse, or narrower title, right? So let's think about, let me try to think of specific examples as we've gone. We've had, so yeah, let's see here. It's a big question. Lots is coming up for me over the years as I've had all these conversations with folks. But I think a general principle is trying to help people find their dream job is always a good idea. And so if it's senior folks, and we had a couple senior people around my first handoff to have someone other than the founder managing the business, we talked fairly openly about who should run the business. And interestingly, some of the senior rainmaking types, others were looking to, maybe you should run the business. They didn't want to, right? So they like rainmaking, they like advising clients. They didn't want to do the quote unquote administrative part of running the business. It was my youngest partner and least tenured partner at the time, Randy Street, who said, he wasn't like vying for the job, but he said, I would consider doing it if you all think I'm a good match. And he was a great match. He was a Harvard MBA, a Bainey. He'd been a Bain for about 8 years, 9 years, and then was in a senior operating role in a real company where he grew this thing very well. So he had the kind of operating background. He had the steady cadence, very brilliant, but willing to listen. I mean, he really, if you'd like listed out all the ideal characteristics of a managing partner, he really had it. So we all kind of threw convention out, and rather than just like have the current biggest name or biggest dollar partner be the president, what made more sense was the person who fit the criteria the best would be named president. So that's one thought. Another one is we've had some mid-senior colleagues over the years who've said things like, I'm tired of doing this kind of work. I want to stay at the firm, but like, I'm not happy. And that doesn't mean that they're a bad person or even a low performer. These are, talented, wonderful people. So just, taking a blank sheet of paper conversation with someone and saying, what does an ideal job look like to you, where you get to do what you're great at and you don't have to do the things you don't like, you're not great at. And a number of times we've had really talented colleagues we've saved and have slotted into a needed role, and where they could really play to their strengths, with most of the hours in the week. So I feel good about those cases. But yeah, and then I think there's a huge difference, as you mentioned, between the client-facing consulting team and the operating leaders who are really good at their functional areas. And that's a mindset shift that we all have to go through in professional services, as you pointed out, but like sooner is better than later. We had a client who yelled at me once, very early days, because I was sending out invoices from my desk, right? This was back in the day of printing and, sending out on, I can't remember if we FedExed or snail mailed invoices, but my client, Kevin, who is a very senior private equity investor out of Lazard in New York, said, sorry, what kind of a popcorn stand are you running over there? Are you personally sending me invoices? And I said, yes, Kevin. And he said, well, how about this? Why don't you hire a CFO who can kind of handle all the back office stuff so you can have more time being client facing? And I thought, well, okay, that sounds like a pretty good idea. So we, this was very early, sub 10 million revenue. We hired a, full blast CFO, which felt expensive at the time. But if you pay people a decent base and have variable comp that goes bigger based on, growth and hitting metrics, you can afford, adult great talent. And we've had wonderful men and women come into our firm at different stages who are a little bit, kind of bigger than the firm was at the time, but knew how to pull us up in finance or marketing or HR, et cetera. But those key functional leader hires, I don't see my peers out there in professional service line putting as much emphasis on as they should.
Yeah. Yeah, and it must warm your heart actually when you come. I mean, we will have both come across firms, especially in professional services, and you go in and your job is to improve performance at the end of the day, and you look at the senior leadership team, and perhaps they've got 100 people, and they haven't got a CFO, and they haven't got a chief people officer.
Right.
And, perhaps they don't have anyone in marketing, and you think, well, there's some fairly so we're talking investment, but there's some fairly quick wins here in terms of, and I guess it's part of a bigger package of professionalizing the roles and responsibilities of the entire organization.
Yes. And I don't think it means that the culture has to get stodgy or overly formal or bureaucratic. That's all. For some reason, that seems to be the counter argument to really professionalizing the firm. I mean, hire amazing people who fit the culture, who happen to be, great at that functional area. I'm of the perception, and our research and practice sort of supports this, which is we're all good at actually a kind of narrow set of things. Like no one's good at 25 things. Like at best, we're good at about 2 things or maybe 3 things. So if you can hire people who are really good at the things that need to get done, they can fit the culture. You can still have a lot of fun and be a very, caring, not family-like, because that to me implies a lack of meritocracy, more nepotism over meritocracy, but a very collegial, upbeat, great culture. You can still have that, and even have that more in spades if you hire great professionals in their areas to help do their part to keep the firm growing, versus over relying on consultants in their free time to do a functional area. Bad idea. Been there, done that. Or not having a key functional area covered by someone who's a real pro at it.
Yep. Okay. I'm really hoping there's a couple of my old clients listening. There was a wonderful phrase you said there, which was or idea you gave over about, professionalization doesn't mean bureaucracy. And
that's right.
When I've suggested leadership changes or leadership change to specific clients, and if they're listening to this, they'll know who they are, came back and said, well, we're not a bureaucracy. We want to be nimble. We want to be quick. We want to be innovative. And my view is, well, you would do that a lot better if you had decent role definitions.
Yes, that's right. Here's an example of a big mistake we made on my watch as when I was running the firm day to day, that an academic pointed out for us. I'll even say who it was because it was all positive. Bob Kagan at Harvard came in as a consultant for a day to help us identify, this sounds a little wonky to your listeners, but it ended up being very useful, to identify, hidden assumptions we were making culturally about our business that were holding us back. And so what was funny is it was supposed to take like 7 hours, but in the first hour, he's like rubbing his temples, listening to us talk and answer his questions and have this, great, session of introspection. And he said, all right, look, he's like, I've already figured it out. So can we just jump to the part where I tell you what the hidden assumption is that you're making that's holding you back? And we all sort of took a deep breath and we were ready to receive his wisdom. And he said, what I'm hearing here is if you have a very, very high bar for hiring people into ghSMART, they don't really need training because they come pre-trained. And I jump up and sort of say, yes, right? And he's like, no. I said, yeah, that's the assumption you're making. But no one's fully trained. No one's pre-trained.
Yep.
Yes, you need training, for example. So what was a lack of bureaucracy, but minus a good professional development function, turned into, goodness, we really do need to give our new folks, a good running start on their onboarding, sharing methodologies and helping accelerate their learning. The mid-level or mid-tenure people, well, they need to learn the next level, client management and business development stuff. And then even the partners who've been here for a while, we're trying to pioneer a new niche in this industry of very high-end leadership consulting for private equity people and billionaire entrepreneurs and governments. It's like, and a lot of this stuff hadn't been really done before. So we're all learning. So we all need professional development. So that was the toggle from nobody great needs training to everybody needs training. And then we hired a professional development pro and built out that function. And it didn't become bureaucratic where we're all sitting in classrooms, with our eyes glazing over as we're being trained on standard operating procedures. Yeah. It's not like that. I think that's what I thought it was going to be like.
Okay.
Instead, it was a highly customized approach to being more deliberate about learning and knowing what we need folks to learn, and really building a culture of learning, which was super, super helpful and made us more nimble and innovative, as you mentioned, than before. We were just kind of repeating what we had already learned.
Yep. Okay, that's brilliant. This is the first conversation I think I've ever had where Kagan and Drucker have been mentioned as people who actually interacted with it, which is incredible.
Yeah, actual people. Yeah, but Drucker gave me an A- for the ghSMART business plan. By the way, he didn't give it an A or an A+, and the reason was he thought that the idea in the market of having a very high-end firm doing leadership assessment and development, that made sense. He's like, that worked. He's like, but I don't know how you're going to get the colleagues, the people to join your company, as he said, with this tough love, very deep accent, sort of like, you don't know anything, you don't know anybody, and no one's going to join your company. He said that. I kind of felt bad about it. And then I thought, all right, well, I turned it around. What is the kind of company that someone who's a top quartile performer out of McKinsey or Bain or BCG or another great firm would want to, leave that behind in order to join us here, or top psychologists? And so it really did put the pressure on to, craft a culture that was worth joining. So thanks, Peter Drucker. He did die about 3 years after I founded ghSMART, and we hadn't yet, hit it quite yet. So, you never knew, just how successful it ended up becoming. But yeah, we have Drucker, we have Kagan, and if I have any other good names to drop, I'll try to think of them before the end of the interview.
Well, listen, that leads nicely on to my next question, which is, leadership development. I could throw a stone out my window, and I'm not in I'm in the countryside, and I could probably hit a leadership development coach or trainer. But
yes,
ghSMART is a different kettle of fish. You have you've developed a highly premium offering, working with some of the top companies in the world at the most senior levels.
Yes.
If acting as Drucker now, how on earth did you do that from PhD students to getting into the boardrooms of companies which most consultants would cut off their right arms to have some of those conversations?
Well, I appreciate that. I think that the skill, so I think it's two things. There's a number of things probably, but two things come to mind on how to have sort of the top of that org chart CEOs, people who run or own large organizations, how to make them clients. Okay, one is you have to decide that is your client that you're going after. So everything we do at ghSMART from the very beginning, keep in mind, before I even started the firm, the PhD dissertation was on how private equity and venture capital investors make better bets on people. So that was the target from the beginning. That helped actually. Henry Kravis, is that name familiar?
Yeah,
He's a KKR, right? So he was a graduate of Claremont. He went to undergrad there, decades before I was there doing my PhD. So number one is deciding to focus on the top. Two is having the courage to not worry about failure or being told no. For example, I called Henry Kravis's assistant to try to get him into my dissertation study, right? And he was my first call. Hey, this is Geoff Smart. I'm at Claremont, where Mr. Kravis donated a building, as far as I can tell, to the Kravis Leadership Institute. May I interview him for my study? And I got told no 4 times by his assistant, Angela. I remember it like it was yesterday. I can name names because that was 30 years ago. But anyway, so she was, she's doing her job as a gatekeeper. Said no, thank you, nope. So I sent a little message over just describing the study, and he said yes. And then once he was in, everybody else wanted to join in and be in the study. They were going to get a copy of the results and all this kind of jazz. So another principle here you're hearing is not taking no for an answer, but also once you get one, you've got 10.
Yep.
So that kind of thing. Then you have to just do good work. So getting in is scary and hard, and you try and you get told no a lot. But once you once you get one of these CEOs or big titans of industry, you just have to do really great work. And then the circles that they travel in and their co-investors and the people who they interact with, that you interact with if you're consulting with them, and through word of mouth is sort of how that spread. So in the very early days, I think it was just a decision to focus on the most influential leaders being the target client. And then, trying hard and not worrying too much when they say no. We had a couple of lucky bounces. We had a billionaire tech CEO read an article in a weird magazine and call us up and say like, hey, we're interested in professionalizing our management team. We'd like to use a more systematic approach. And so I remember, getting this call. I was still working on my dissertation at the time. I wasn't even out of grad school. A Fortune 500 large tech company head of HR was calling to say like, hey, we'd like to talk to ghSMART about doing some work. And I played hard to get. I hope no clients are listening right now. This is just for your listeners, just for your fellow, brothers and sisters in professional services. But I played a bit hard to get. I said, oh, well, thank you for your call. We are quite busy and we're not currently taking on new clients, which was true because I was just almost done with the dissertation and I had 2 clients that were taking up most of my time. I was vaguely aware of this client. I knew who they were and they were an attractive client, but I didn't want to sound desperate. So they said, oh, and you're not going to believe this next part. You will think I'm not telling the truth on this next part. Joe, I said, I'm willing. They said, well, if you'd like to come up here, meet with the HR department, we'd love to have a chat. And I said, oh, that's kind. I said, I really don't have time for that. But if your CEO wants to fly to me in Chicago, I would meet him for 30 minutes. And Joe, just listen, I was 25 years old, pre-PhD, and I had ghSMART for 2 whole years. And, we're just doing little projects with whoever would hire. So the guy couldn't believe it. He was, what? Anyway, the next day I got a call from the assistant saying like, oh yeah, so-and-so wants to come visit you. And so-and-so came and visited. I picked him up at the FBO as he stepped off his, private jet. And we had about a 3-hour meeting just talking about what he was trying to do just to make better people decisions at the senior level, and did the work on that one. That was so early. I called my dad in for support for some gray hair in the room. So I'm 24, 25. My dad was like 50 something, right? And so I was like, Dad, I need you to just be in this meeting. Okay. So it was a fun collab. It was I think we shared maybe 2 or 3 very early clients in ghSMART's history where I'd call in my dad and come sit in the room, and together, we had it was a wonderful father-son bonding opportunity, but we had fun advising this client for about 5 or 6 years. And it was a great experience, but that's another, I don't know, what do you call it? Swagger or confidence or something. But I did sense that the folks at the top of the house, have a lot of people trying to work with them. And if they sense that you have something special. Oh, also last thing, we guaranteed client satisfaction with the work from the very beginning. And that was just feeling like, I don't know, like I would feel bad if we charged a bunch of money for something and the client didn't like it. And also it allowed me to keep my ghSMART colleagues honest on making sure we're always giving value, because I would just tell them, hey, look, if they don't like it, we're getting the feedback, and then you have to cough up your portion of it. So let's make sure our clients are happy. So that's another ninja tactic for serving the top of the house, is the quality has to be super duper high. And so if you charge a lot, but you guarantee the client's happiness, it makes them a little less afraid to try out the service.
Yeah, and it builds on that confidence. You're looking confident in your product. You're acting confident. I love that story. That's incredible, isn't it?
Thank you. Today it seems irresponsible and kind of incredible, but at the time it was fun. It was a combination of, this is an attractive client, so let's play a little bit hard to get, but also, I was just like actually busy. So, and I didn't want to go up there and get stuck talking to the direct report of the direct report to the direct report of the head of HR. I just didn't want to. So it was a bit of practicality. But today, same thing. I was so basically, I don't know, doing quality work is like 95% of it, I think, because the word spreads, and then this CEOs talk to each other and they'll refer you and you'll get tons of work. So that's the main way to sustain a top of the house client base, but getting them to begin with, any kind of guerrilla tactics to even get the meeting, I think is requires a bit of thick skin to not worry about being told no. I've been told no many more times than being told yes, and at some point, if you're okay with that, I think it relieves some of the stress of really trying to go for it into serving the biggest clients.
Yeah. Okay. And kind of following on from that question, you're quite dominant in, there's a very specific niche you've got there.
Yes.
You're pretty dominant in that niche. What was that always a strategy? Did you think you would be as successful as you have been? Or has this, from the beginning, or has this been sort of an emergent strategy as you went along?
Yeah, what's funny is, so the niche you're talking about is in the world of private equity. We brought management assessment and high-end leadership coaching into that space. None of those early clients had another provider that that we're trying to kick out. Like it was a do-it-yourself kind of thing, right? Private equity people. In fact, this giant private equity firm that's based in Washington, D.C. in the USA had us in to a partner meeting on a Monday, and there's all these, maybe 15 partners in this giant mahogany boardroom, and then on the flat screens, there's Tokyo, Shanghai, Paris, London,
Wow.
and it's a little nerve-wracking. And one of them, and the point of the meeting was for us to basically pitch our services around doing management due diligence services for them when they're thinking about making an investment. And one of the partners on the TV said, "Hold on a second. I thought we're supposed to be good at evaluating management teams, as a reason why they wouldn't want to use us." And do you remember those Polycom things, the voice box, the speaker microphone right in front of me, and I dramatically reached out to it and I tapped it. I said, "Boom, boom, boom." I said, "Sorry, I didn't know if I caught that audio. Did you say that this organization is good at evaluating management, or you're supposed to be good at evaluating management?" There was about a half second where my heart was just like stopped beating. And then everybody in the room and on the TV started laughing. Everyone was saying, "All right, fair enough. We could always get better at this." I said, "Well, fair enough." And that's what our other clients want to take it from, 80% accurate to 95% accurate in their evaluations of management teams. So the billionaire founder of this giant private equity firm scribbles a note and puts it down. He was sitting right next to me and walks out of the room. And I pick up the note, and it says specific suggestion, raise your prices. And Joe,
wonderful.
Clearly the best day in business any entrepreneur in professional services could possibly imagine, is like taking a bit of a high risk tactic, landing the business, and then having the founder say, "You know what, we'd like to pay more for this." And I literally have no idea why he wrote that. Like, why would they want to pay more? I think he was like saying, "Look, you're early and you're learning about this stuff, but your peer groups charge way more than you do. So you guys need to just and we did. We took it as advice. We charged, but we increased our pricing so much that we actually bled off about 20% of our low end clients in order to make capacity for the high end. And we just kind of ratcheted up the client base from that moment forward. And that was a solid 10 years after founding, though. That wasn't like on day 2.
Okay. And I'm hoping that Post-it is framed somewhere.
Yes, it is. It's at my main house in Denver, Colorado. It is for sure framed. I would show it to you next time we chat if I'm back home.
Wow, that's amazing. And I'm guessing that shift also helped you. I guess that was 2005-ish. I'm guessing that shift also helped you because your margins are going to be higher. The expectations of people is going to be higher. I'm guessing that freed up a little bit of money to, get in more senior people, perhaps, or I don't know.
Yeah, it was more of like adding the professional staff with the big capital outlays. Hiring more people in finance, hiring our first CHRO around that time, building out the professional development capabilities at the firm so we could train our people on. So it was a lot of that. What else do we use money for in the early? Yeah, I mean, it was just and be able to just maximize on people's incomes so we could continue to tell folks that you can come here and make a lot of impact, make a lot of money, and have more freedom and flexibility in your calendar, your schedule than what you might be used to. So yeah, it was a genuine interest to do impactful work. We also very early on, sorry, not very early on, from the very beginning, we never had offices. So I started the company when I was a grad student.
Wow.
We didn't have any money. I didn't want to go raise a bunch of money. So no offices. So we were remote, not starting in COVID, but starting in 1995.
Yeah.
So it was right around the time when, your mobile phone started becoming an accepted business practice where you could, talk on the phone, send emails for the first time ever. So I mean, the way it played out was we would charge the high rates after our one client told us to, and we matched sort of MBB rates. So high rates, very low SG&A because we didn't have offices, and then we could just basically pay people more and then attract the best and brightest to come on over and do this work. So that was kind of a virtuous cycle. And then it wasn't until later years that then we'd peel off real chunks of free cash flow to open an international office or invest in a new product suite and that kind of thing.
Yep, brilliant. This is I've got so many questions firing off in my head. One of them is the most trite question you can imagine, that you're probably better placed than anyone in the world to answer it, and you'd have seen Harvard Business Review articles on this, and that is the born or bred question. And I come across some leaders, and I think no matter how many training courses I put you through, you're not going to do this. There's a big mindset block. It might even go back to your childhood. Whereas others, you kind of think, well, listen, if we upped you a bit on business development skills or communication skills, is that a view that you would share, or are you a believer that you can make a leader out of anyone given enough time?
No, yeah. Let's see. Let's think about this for a second. So. I've evolved a little bit in my thinking from thinking that it was almost entirely born, not bred. And as a result of born, not bred, our early products were all assessment oriented, like just pick the right winner, right? People can't develop. So your whole job as a CEO, as a senior person, is to select the right person. So that was both an assumption and product set. And in culturally at ghSMART that Bob Kagan pointed out was the assumption. So since then, I think what I've seen in just out in client land as well as internally at ghSMART is people can learn and do learn in categories that are learnable. But I think there are some categories that are less learnable. So it's a tricky discussion to try to figure out. If it's time to. I think it really. The question is front center when it's around hiring someone. Hey, here's some strength areas, but they've got a couple weaker areas. Are they coachable in those areas or not? And then also just around if someone's underperforming, was that a hiring mistake, or can the person learn and grow and perform well? So I'm still, let's see, if I used to be honestly like 95%, 5% on born versus bred. I really think there's a high natural sort of set of behavioral inclinations that kind of come with somebody. I'd say I'm sort of 70-30 today on, I think there's a lot of innate qualities that aren't very changeable over time that predict or suggest why you behave how you do. But a solid 30% of things are learnable. And so I'd say the learnable, so the things that are hardwired that we don't see people change a whole lot is like actually work ethic. Weirdly, you'd think, can't you just work harder? No, people are kind of hardworking people and like less hardworking people. So like we have this potential model we use at ghSMART now with some of our clients has, the drive. It's kind of like EQ matters, right? Emotional awareness. Some of that's hardwired. Some of it, sure, you could say things to make you sound more extroverted if you're extreme introvert, that kind of thing. But generally, EQ, at least half of it is fairly hardwired. I think drive, about half of it or more, fairly hardwired. And then cognitive skills different from EQ, different from drive. Like what is it? G, just intelligence, like just raw brain power. Not everybody can do, 10-digit division in their heads. It just, even with practice, like I just don't think they do. So yeah, so I'd say, a lot of it is hardwired. Knowing what we're hardwired to be good at and find fulfillment and enjoyment doing is part of the fun, I think, of offering folks career strategy advice. But if it's an area for improvement, is an area that's learnable, technical skills learnable, public speaking skills learnable, people who senior executive presence skills, very learnable, that kind of thing. But you have some like honesty stuff and integrity, a little bit less learnable. Hard work ethic, and to a great extent, introversion, extroversion. I will say some of our research on CEO success suggests that by a slight margin, introverts actually outperform extroverts in the C-suite. So like this whole idea that people who interview well and who are really fun to talk with, you'd want to spend a day on a plane with, careful, you got to like check some of those assumptions, because actually the introverts outperform the extroverts. So anyway, I'd say overall 70-30, born versus developable.
Okay, thank you. That's a nice, clear answer with justified reasons. I saw the research on the introverts and extroverts, and I thought that was really interesting. I think there'd be a nice no one has time for this, but I think there'd be a nice international study to see if it held around the world, different emphases and things.
Agreed, and that's very important for us right now as a firm, because we're in the U.S., U.K., Germany, Canada, and we just are opening our first Asia Pacific office out of Sydney, Australia, of all places, right now. And so, we're going to climb up the Pacific Rim and also, spread it throughout continental Europe, and then get a Latin America, Middle East, and Africa strategy. And it's kind of one of these things where, does leadership matter everywhere? Yes. Okay. Well, that's pretty broad. Okay. Well, does selecting good leaders and developing good leaders, is that important everywhere? Yeah, mostly, except for some of the regions of the world that are highly family oriented, and just family businesses, and governments and families and all that kind of stuff, where maybe bloodline is more important than talent. But then as you get into it, like, how do you evaluate a leader in one culture? How do you develop someone the right way that fits that culture? Wonderful questions. We will continue to research and learn from the School of Hard Knocks. But I don't think brash Americans should go all over the world. Having a one size fits all approach to assessing and developing talented teams.
Yep. I learned that lesson the hard way when I was a corporate consultant working. I rolled things out around the world, and I learned very quickly that what works in the US and the UK doesn't work in Japan or Thailand.
Yes, absolutely. And then there's a version of communication and culture and norms and that kind of thing. And once you crack that code, then you can start to convert practices into the culturally relevant way of expressing them.
Geoff, I run a boutique leaders group, and it's sort of about 30 of us that get together each month and just chat about leadership challenges. And I told them I was chatting to you, and many of them got very excited, and they gave me a long list of questions they wanted to ask, but I've kind of whittled it down.
Do a lightning round.
Brilliant.
We'll do quick answers.
Okay.
Yes, let's do it.
Right. So
give the people what they want.
Number one, you get great client feedback. How do you strike a balance between getting great actionable data from clients and not taking too much of their time up?
Yeah, I appreciate that. What came up for me with that question is collecting client data in the course of doing work and service of the client, I think is fine. So thoroughness is good. If clients feel like the data collection is tangential or not part of the work you're doing for them, they get less excited about it. Okay. But if you're basically like, hey, look, in order to get to the right answer here and really have the very best insights, yes, we need 4 hours of your time and 3 hours of their time, and to get these groups of people together, and you have to be fairly directive about the data collection that you need in order to arrive at the answer. We just had this done to us. We hired a branding firm. I couldn't believe how thorough they were. We're come up with a new logo and some new words to describe what we do for different client segments. They were so thorough. It's called Agenda out of New York. If anyone wants to have a branding firm that really does an unbelievable amount of work. And it didn't bother me as the client because I sensed that it was out of their spirit of trying to achieve excellence. If it feels academic, or if they're like, I have been yelled at. We did a client satisfaction survey every 6 months to all of our clients. I remember the head of HR of a big private equity firm yelled at me, I don't have time to fill this out. And I was like, hey, look, it's 2 questions. The first question is, how happy are you with our services? And you have like five point, very, whatever, rate the value of the services. And it's like outstanding, very good, good, poor, very poor. And then like explain. It's 2 questions. Like it'll take you no time or a little bit of time. And if you have a special request, there's a way that you can, communicate it kind of thing. So I've gotten slapped down a little bit on client satisfaction data collection, but if the data collection is specifically advancing the question the client's trying to answer, you can be pretty bold about asking for as much time as you want.
Okay, thank you. Okay, number 2.
Yeah.
The business is still synonymous with you as an individual, but it's clearly scaled way beyond you. How did you manage building the business beyond you to create scale? And
go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
It was I remember like it was yesterday. 3 things happened all in one time. The recession of 2009 was stressful. We were off about 20% in revenue. I was still managing the business. So from 1995 to 2009, I managed it day to day. Number 2, I was at a young president's organization, YPO event I was a member of it. And someone who had scaled a great business said, you have to realize that in order to scale your business, you have to work on your business, not in your business. And I thought, I think I get it. I totally get it. And then number 3 is we had talented people who could run the business better than I could. So it was a decision at that point that I was going to hire or promote, in this case, a president to run the business. That president told me I wasn't allowed to show up at partner meetings. Otherwise it would undermine his authority. He told me, like, he said, I'll give you any information you want. Just tell me what information you want, but you can't like call me and bug me constantly and like breathe down my neck. I thought, okay. So that was good on his part. Of smart advice. And then he was like, yeah, look, if I'm hitting the numbers, then like we're going to have a great relationship and I'll call you if I need anything. But I don't need a whole lot of direction. Thank you very much. And I said, that's fair. And so, we had a wonderful 12-year run. He was the managing partner, Randy Street. We co-wrote the Who book together, by the way, before that all started. So had a great run. He's vice chairman today. He does partner development. He does rainmaking. He does all this great stuff, but he doesn't have to run the day-to-day because guess what? COVID burned him out. Like the 2009 recession burned me out. And he said, you know what? After running this thing for 12 years, let's give it to someone else. So I'd say you can't run the business and expect leadership and innovation to happen, I think. And so what do you do then? What do you do? Well, what you do is be the chairman and founder or a senior person, and you let the person who's running the business run the business. They run the meetings. They are in the partner meetings. They do all the Monday morning communication to the firm. They do the spotlight leader stuff. They're the leader, and you have to let them be the leader. And you shut up and you sit in the back and you smile and nod and you advise them from behind. And sure, you've got decision rights on budget. You've got a lot of power still, but you're letting other people, do their job to run the business. I think being very careful on selection, being very willing to delegate, and then look for ways to add value. So I still do branding and business development and recruiting work, but like kind of grunt work stuff. Like I like that stuff. So I'll work with small teams on like our brand refresh. I'll work with small teams on the recruiting side to bring people into our business, or other special creative projects. We did a big DE&I thing that I kind of helped get going about 5 years ago, which was a lot of fun. So yeah, you can have a nice variety of jobs to do, but managing the business isn't one of them. Once you name and the successors and the appointed leaders to manage the business.
Again, I really hope there's a different couple of clients listening to this, because they'll know who they are. They have appointed CEOs and they are all over the CEO in terms of figures and updates and micromanaging and all the rest of it. And it's not a solution for a happy life, let alone an effective company.
I think that's right. And it takes a weird amount of trust but verify, as our late Ronald Reagan said it in America, is a wonderful way to do it in that kind of relationship. But you definitely can't micromanage. Like Marshall Goldsmith's book, "What Got You Here Won't Get You There," comes to mind, where he identifies 20 behavioral derailers that senior executives make mistakes around, and adding too much information or like wanting to micromanage and constantly critique and guide people too closely is a very common challenge. But yeah, it's so much better to put your energy into hiring the right people and then let them do their job. Warren Buffett said it, which is hire well, manage little. And I really like that quote. It really fits our who philosophy.
Yeah. Yeah, and then also if you're managing the culture as well, then that means that you don't have to micromanage. Yeah, great.
Right.
The third question I had, and this is the penultimate one, is, and this is quite a big one, but if you could give advice to your younger self when starting and growing the company, I guess this is a question about what would you do differently, but what advice would you give that younger Geoff?
Yeah, I'll start with differently, and I'll throw in a couple of would done it the sames also. Differently, three things. One is our using digital technology was way too late. So we were innovative in 1995 by using cell phones and email and PowerPoint, and we were like Microsoft's like early adopters. So we used new and emerging technology back in the 90s. There have been several shifts in technology that would have been helpful tools for us that we've just sort of been too, I don't know, like we felt like we've been above it. Oh, we have such a senior clientele, they need the white glove service. Like we don't need all this technology. But I think that was a miss. So we've been investing just heavily in recent years to catch up and leapfrog our folks who are out there, competitors who are doing a good job of using data analytics and tools and just communication tools, that kind of. So more technology earlier, more robust. I would have given my earlier self that. Like diversity, equity, and inclusion, I think has always been a value. I think we've really cranked it up in the last 5 to 10 years at our firm, both because the work we do in the client side is very impactful in this area of like helping clients be more inclusive and representative. And then just internally, 53% of our partners are women. Great. Like, so that's rare in consulting. And, we have a really diverse, we're just named #1 most diverse consulting firm by Vault for this year for 2023 out of 70,000 companies. So I don't know, like I feel good about that. Like today it's great, but like we could have gotten started earlier. We just like, it wasn't on the radar screen as early. And then 3, international expansion. I mean, I think we've been at a disadvantage relative to larger consulting firms who don't do exactly what we do, but who do similar things to what we do, can take care of international clients, global clients who are all over the place. And we've been, we were more North American focused until just a few years ago. So I would have gotten going on having just one outpost in, Europe, Asia, South America, Middle East, Africa earlier. So I'd say those 3 would be I should have done them earlier. And then what we wouldn't have changed, I wouldn't change who the client is, which is CEO. Cap that. I wouldn't have changed just the mind-numbing amount of work we go through to hire the very best talent in the company. Like it's a lot of extra work to really get the superstars to come over. That's been worth it. And then paying in a fairly meritocratic way that is largely formulaic based on client satisfaction and revenue, where we sort of say, like no one's capped. Like you can make infinite money here, like literally. Like it's like the thought that it's in people's power to create wealth and rewards based on their good work, I think is really important versus having folks feel mad that they've been capped and that they're being like exploited in some way. And we're kind of like, no, we're here to like help you make as much money as humanly possible, not limit your potential. So I think that those are so client selection, hiring bar, and compensation, transparency, and meritocracy. Those were the good ones that I would have kept.
Brilliant. Thank you. And one final question.
Sure.
Inflection points. So in terms of leadership teams, I mean, I see inflection points in terms of growth, but both in terms of your own company and other professional service firms, Is it kind of the 30 people, 90 people, or 100 people? What are the big inflection points when it comes to leadership teams, do you think?
Sure. Yeah. Okay. In our industry, that sounds about right. Maybe in less than 30, like 10 or 12 people is different from like a 2 or 3 person, ultra small boutique, like 2 or 3, like someone with a couple of colleagues. Like there are a lot of those firms out there. So going from that to like 10, I think people, that 10's an inflection point. Yeah, 90 or 100. Yeah, 10, 30, 90 to 100. And then 150, I think, are the inflection points where it just did seem like a different organism, that needed different things. And then, how to keep from this point forward, a great culture as we expand geographically will be a big challenge. It's front and center. We're, paying very close attention to it. But I don't know what the next one was. I was talking to an investment banker yesterday who told me she thought after 150 people, like 1,000 was the next marker where it's a whole new ball game. And so, okay, well, that's good in that case. This current model's working pretty well, so we'll keep on trucking with 150 going to 1,000.
Good, brilliant. Listen, Geoff, thank you. I could talk to you for hours, but I realise you're a busy guy. I could also talk. The listeners can't see them, but I could talk to you for hours about the books you've got behind you. We've got a lot in common with the book selection. So
wonderful. Well, yes, I thank you. Yes, for as long as books are still going to be a medium for communication, I will buy them and read them. But yeah, it was a great pleasure talking with you, Joe. And yeah, we're happy to stay in touch here as we have a very similar overlapping mission, which is to help leaders be successful. I really find your work and research valuable. I always read what you're putting out. So keep up the great work on your side and stay in touch.
Thank you, Geoff. Take care.
Pleasure.